Ortiz.
Yes.
Dino. Tell us about the name of your firm and what you do, and what's made you so successful over the years.
Well, the name of my firm is Laguna Beach Legal Document and Mediation Services, and basically the name says it all. So what I do is I prepare legal documents for attorneys and also for the public, and I also do divorce mediation. So I always tell people, try divorce mediation as a first resort if you're able to communicate to keep the family together. And if it doesn't work, then of course, Barry is the place to go for the litigation and he'll be on your side and he'll fight for you. As a mediator, I have to stay neutral. So I can't take sides, and I really have to think about the kid's best interest rather than the sides.
How does mediation work? Do you have to have a special license for that?
Yes, you do have to have a special license. And then also the equivalent to that is years of training. So I have mediated over 2,000 cases throughout my career.
Wow, that's impressive.
I think that prepares you a lot more for mediation than the actual courses.
Okay. So for the most part, I think all of us know somebody that's been divorced. In fact, my partner, Mike, I think he's been divorced 4 or 5 times now. 7. and then we got our producer, Phil, who is just terrified of the whole subject. And, I think the stats are 50% or so, but yet and then they go up if you've been divorced before. So in Orange County, I believe I read somewhere that it was even higher than 50%. What in the heck is going on out there, and why is it so high?
Well, it's not really a legal question. It's a cultural question about our society. And what's really happening in our society is a breakdown of the old traditional family unit of mom, dad, and kids all staying together and living together. The majority of households now are single-parent households, not husband and wife households. And because life has changed, and since women's rights in the 60s and women having independent careers and everybody having their own ability to make money and support themselves and wanting their independence, and then there is a great feeling in our society of abundance. There's a lot of people you can choose from. So there's a lot of changing. You like one person, I don't have to stay here. I don't have to be committed. Oh, there's another person here. I'll go with that person. So I think that's what causes it.
Barry, do you find that different cultures, even in today's day and age, stay together more often, even if they're unhappy?
Yes, I do find certain cultures have a lower divorce rate. It really depends upon the structure of the family unit and how strong that is.
Ellie, you do mediation. What's the success ratio of that?
Well, in our office, we have a really high success rate. And now the success rate starts from when the parties agree to mediate. So that doesn't always happen. There are a lot of people that come in for to get information on mediation and divorce, and it scares them and they don't want to go through the mediation. So they do go with attorneys. But once they've committed to mediation as an alternative, then we have a 99% success rate.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I know when you have an attorney, right? Each party has an attorney, and the numbers come out, and this is what everybody wants. Everybody seems to want to argue that number. It's rarely ever accepted the first time. With mediation, do they just say, "Oh, she's got nobody's interest at heart, so whatever she says must be," or do they start negotiating as well?
No, of course they negotiate. Yeah, they negotiate, and I help them as much as I can, and then I send them out to experts if they need experts, such as appraisals for property or financial planners, whatever
Sure.
that is that I can't help them with.
What about prenups? I know they're created to make things easier, and let's start with the mediation aspect of it. When somebody comes in and they have a prenup, does that help the mediation process?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It sure does, because it eliminates a lot of questions.
And Barry, let me ask you as an attorney, when somebody has a prenup and comes in, and let's say the wife, isn't going to get as much because of it, and she comes to you, do you look at that and say, absolutely not, I'm going to tear this thing apart? And
yes, I do.
Yes, you do.
Prenups are like, there's a purpose for a prenup. The purpose of a prenup is to protect your assets and your future income from being shared with a person that you don't trust that you're about to marry. So it's, contraindicated, you love this person, you want to share your life with them, you're planning to be with them forever. You're certainly telling them that I'm going to marry you and be together forever, but sign here so you don't get anything from me. So it's kind of like a problem, the prenup, because in relationships, it's a problem.
So would you say that a divorce situation that has a prenup is going to end up costing everybody a heck of a lot more money?
If you're going to fight the prenup, that's a case in itself.
Okay.
Then you still have to identify, characterize the assets, separate property, community property, value the assets, divide the assets. And then you have to argue about what's the true income. Well, the perks that the person gets in the business should be tacked on to the income. What is the spousal support? What is the child support? And then, of course, we have to argue about which side is going to pay for the attorney's fees for the other side.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on in a divorce case.
Correct me if I'm wrong. A prenup is only valid for the spousal support, not for child support.
It's not only for spousal support. It's for anything having to do with property. You can prevent division of property. You could prevent property being transferred. You cannot contract to limit child support in any way, under any circumstance. So like we get these cases where someone comes in and says, I don't want to pay child support anymore. So I'll give her $100,000 and I'm not going to pay child support. Well, it doesn't work. It's a void against public policy. You can't contract away your obligation for child support.
What if the other spouse agrees to the $100,000?
Doesn't matter.
So even if he or she agrees to it, the courts will not allow it.
Well, it's not enforceable. It's a provision that's against the policy and the laws of the state of California. And either spouse, either parent can go in the next day and request child support and get a new child support order. Even with that agreement in place, it has no effect.
Wow. So let's talk about the prenup for just a little bit longer. What are the absolute necessary items that need to be in a prenup in order to make it legal?
Consent by both parties, full disclosure of assets, liabilities, and income exchange prior to, a very clearly defined agreement. It has to be clear. It can't be ambiguous. And it has to be presented to the other side an adequate enough time before the date of the wedding to make it legal, because you can't present it a week before and expect the other spouse. For instance, let me give you an example. How long does it take to plan a wedding? 90 days? 100 days? So the person's planning the wedding, booked the catering hall, sent the invitations, and now when all that's done and all the relatives are going to show up, they start negotiating a prenup? Well, it's unfair. There's duress there. There's coercion there. It has to be free of those things. It has to be a voluntary agreement.
Great information. Thank you. What about mediation versus divorce? What kind of costs are involved in mediation? And then, Barry, what kind of costs are involved in divorce?
I charge flat fees for mediation. And so I charge $5,000 to mediate a case. And
do you put a time limit on that and say, yes, you're going to get X amount of hours from me?
Yes, okay. I do. Because otherwise it gets ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And then I always tell them, that's a drop in the bucket if you do need to hire an attorney. So Barry can tell you the rest.
Well, divorce can be very inexpensive. For instance, if two people act like adults and they remove the emotional problems, because, when someone starts a separation, they're suffering from rejection, betrayal, disappointment, anger, fear. They have all that going on because they're uncertain about their future. So if they could come into the office and sit down and say, okay, you take the house, I take the business, and we share the kids 50-50. we can do the divorce for an economical price because we just sit down and write up an agreement. Everybody signs it and the court processes it. What feeds a divorce and what costs so much money is the anger between people, because that's what drives up the cost. Now, if you have a complex divorce and people have a lot of assets and it's complicated, for instance, the wife owned the house before marriage, then they got married, then they improved the house with the husband's separate property, and now it's community property, and you got to analyze all that. It costs money to do that. You have to appraise it. There's all kinds of case law that governs the formulas on it. So divorce can be an inexpensive process if you do it in a conscious way, but it could also be a very expensive process. It really depends upon the two individuals.
Ellie, what about declaration of disclosure? What is that?
Well, basically, every party has to disclose and do a full and honest disclosure of all of their assets, debts, income, expenses prior to entering into a agreement, in my case, or entering into a court judgment in Barry's case.
Okay. What about when kids are involved? Does that change the outcome of mediation? Do you handle it differently?
Well, it's a lot more challenging when kids are involved, especially if there's one parent that is very reluctant to let go of the children. That always makes it a little bit more difficult. I've had a mediation where, I was told that the father is just an accessory and he doesn't really need to be there, and they're the family. And so things like that, of course, make things more difficult. But we work through that. Do
you get involved in that, or are you just dollars? This is how much you have to pay every month. This is who gets the property. Or do you say this is how much time you have with the kids as well?
Well, I make suggestions. I can't, I don't give legal advice, but I do make suggestions as a mediator, and I do get involved in that. I get very heavily involved in it. I work with a lot of family therapists that I recommend for them to go and talk to after we reach our agreement, to try to work on building the family. Everything that I do is for the family and keeping the family unit together, because I know that after the divorce is final, the kids grow up, they have birthday parties, they have weddings, you have to be in the room with the same people over and over again throughout the course of your life when you have children together. Right. So that's really where I come from when I do the mediation. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so successful, is because people see that, that's the intention.
Right. So do you find yourself being as much of a counselor as a mediator?
Yeah.
Can you prescribe any medication as well?
No, I wish I could for myself sometimes.
I would have to imagine for both of you guys dealing with such emotional people, it's just got to be tough for you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very challenging. And when I'm going through, however long the period is that we're going through the mediation, I go to sleep thinking about the clients. I wake up thinking about them. It's really hard to think about anything else because they're my number one priority in trying to help them figure out a way to settle their situation.
We've been talking a lot about divorce, but a lot of what I wanted to cover as well is also estate planning. And Ellie, the services you provide, aside from the mediation for divorce, you also help incorporate people, create wills and trusts and all that. Do you believe everybody should have a will and a trust, or is that the type of thing that you need to wait until you have some assets?
Well, I think that everybody should have a living trust because it avoids probate. I mean, there are laws that certain estates under certain value don't have to go through probate, but it's a lot less expensive to prepare a living trust. It's $750 for a complete estate plan for a single person.
And how much would an attorney charge for that?
For what?
For an estate plan?
It depends. Probably anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000, depending the size of the estate, the complexities. There's so many variables. I don't know.
But in your case, Ellie, you do it just kind of a basic package, right? Is what, $750?
Well, I do a package, and I also do packages for attorneys as well. So for an attorney that doesn't do estate planning, then I'll prepare the paperwork for them, and then they present it to their clients, give the legal advice, direct me on how they'd like it prepared, And so I assist in that capacity as well.